A good week is the greatest revenue growth tool, and nothing increases the value of your business as much as focused, consistent weekly sales execution. Your execution capability is as valuable as your product. This playbook gives you the big metrics and the big questions to help your sales organization understand if they just had a good week and what exactly is needed to deliver another good week. By way of a quick background check, we have worked with thousands of sales teams and their managers at owner, founder, CEO, and sales leader level. In particular, we have participated in thousands of weekly sales meetings, diagnosing raw, live pipelines and forecasts while struggling through CRM dashboards, many of which were supporting poor decisions and sending everyone in the opposite direction of the fixes that were needed. We like to say that while we're from the data-driven school, we're even more so from the data-aware school. When you create an awareness around a couple of big metrics across the sales team, your execution capability is already more effective. It's no coincidence that private equity firms and VCs invest for usually no more than 5 years in a company. Sales is not just about meeting revenue and customer targets. It's performing against the clock that's the hardest piece. If you are going to grow sales and revenue, it will happen sooner or not at all, and it's the clock that is the toughest boss and best teacher. Imagine you want to or even need to do 5 years growth in 3 years. That's 12 quarters or 156 weeks. Your already successful business will reach its potential 1 week at a time. Every week is like a small chunk of investment, waiting for you to decide how to use it wisely. Using the week wisely requires getting agreement around one thing in particular: relentless execution. How do you know that relentless execution is or is not happening? Sales reporting has become KPI intensive. Not only are there too many KPIs, but the wrong metrics get relied on and make it into the headlines each week, while the correct metrics are not even on the data menu. What's needed is a data diet. So we're going to give you the 2 big metrics that tell you if you're on track each week. The first is risk to revenue. That's for the month and quarter in particular, but usually no longer than the extreme end of the sales cycle for your business. The second is risk to growth, which is for the short, medium, and long-term health of the business and the pipeline. Crucially, these metrics have to be recalibrated each week, ideally on a Friday morning or afternoon. We call this sales governance as opposed to sales reporting. Reporting is for KPIs. Governance is for the big metrics. The big metrics of risk to revenue and risk to growth need to keep moving at the right pace each week relentlessly if you want to do 5 years growth in 3 years. They are now the concern of the whole senior leadership team and not just the sales function. Now we have a new acronym, BRMs, Big Risk Metrics. In the metrics deck, BRMs trump KPIs. CRMs usually show value coverage. For example, 2 million in pipeline. Early in the month or quarter, it's easy to assume you're fully covered. But CRM dashboards and reports hide the risk, specifically the risk to revenue. In fact, they give the impression that there is no risk. What they miss is the location of the alleged revenue in the pipeline. The manager gets no sense of the distance the revenue has to travel against the clock. The risk is in the distance, so we give distance a color. The distance to revenue becomes the risk to revenue. By the way, when we use the word revenue, it can mean gross revenue, margin, monthly recurring fees, project value, etc. That depends on how you capture deal values in the CRM. Deals or opportunities in the green zone have the shortest distance to travel, while red revenue has the longest distance. Amber can be closer to green or closer to red. Green zone revenue is either already closed or of salary bet commit quality. Once committed, it cannot be taken back nor withdrawn. But there is also a green zone standard. The full month target should be committed by the 15th day of each month. That's like running 5 kilometers in 20 minutes, and it's the standard to aim for. If your business operates only to quarterly targets, the green zone standard is measured against the 15th day of the middle month of the quarter. This is sales against the clock. The sales organization has to be effective 52 weeks a year. Every missed week is an added risk to revenue. The real reason we build a sales organization with expensive salespeople is to guarantee the timing of revenue and not just the amount. If you focus on the timing of revenue, the amount or the value will begin to look after itself. The timing and distance standards drive much more effective daily and weekly behaviors. The clock is the best boss. Now we can ask certain questions that help us with the governance of revenue risk. The first is, what percentage of the month and quarter target is already in the green zone? The emphasis here is on the word already. The elite standard is that by the 15th of the month, 100% of the month's target is already in the green. We're giving you a 5 kilometers in 20 minutes standard, but in practice, you'll need to work towards that. For example, if 50% of the target was in amber and 50% in green by mid-month or mid-quarter, you would be on the way to substantially reducing your risk to revenue. A big question is how dependent is target attainment on revenue that is still in the red zone by the middle of a month or quarter? The red, amber, green, or RAG system gets each seller thinking more deeply about their own personal performance. We also get our clients to run an RAG version 1.0 and version 2.0 report. The RAG 1.0 is a red-amber-green view of the pipeline before each deal is individually diagnosed. It's the unfiltered version. RAG version 2.0 is produced after a deal-by-deal diagnosis, and that's going to be more accurate and realistic. Version 2.0 gives you the true picture of what to fix. Risk to revenue is a shorter-term big metric. It doesn't look beyond the sales cycle. For example, 1 to 2 quarters typically, although some cycles may stretch into several quarters. Risk to growth, on the other hand, takes in the short, medium, and long term. One of its roles is to protect the business 2 to 3 years from now. The growth of the company is a function of the growth in opportunity creation, whether from new or existing customer or accounts. We are not just referring to net new business here. Opportunity creation cannot be a top-up option. We're referring to new scheduled opportunities, where the seller's name is in the buyer's calendar. A critical moment in pipeline creation is the first time a buyer engages on a scheduled basis with the company. Senior management needs to make new scheduled opportunity creation a strategic weekly priority. But the actual metric to track is specifically the moving average of new scheduled opportunities created per week. That allows for shorter-term fluctuations while protecting the risk-to-growth metric. You could pitch an investor on the strength of this graph. It's the weekly moving average of new opportunities created that have a scheduled date and time with a buyer. These could be exclusively from net new business or a blend of new and existing. A more subtle related metric is the number of new scheduled opportunities that had a completed engagement, i.e., the buyer actually turned up. This curve over time just doesn't lie. You can have a bad week, even a bad spell, but the moving average needs to recover in time. We'd strongly recommend that you talk to your CRM admin or business intelligence people and ask them to produce a weekly moving average of new scheduled opportunities created and completed. Until you visualize the long-term trend, most salespeople don't appreciate the strategic effect that this big metric has on the long-term health of the business and also on their own career and income success. It's no coincidence that we have visualized our two big metrics of risk to revenue and risk to growth. You need to effectively visualize certain critical metrics and ideas because words and numbers alone can sound like preaching. What's the right number of new scheduled opportunities per seller needed each week to guarantee the growth we need? One of the common sound bites in modern sales is that it's all about quality over quantity. We totally agree, except we would also make the point that the quantity is not zero. No amount of quality will replace inadequate quantity in a sales pipeline, at least not twice in a lifetime. As mentioned earlier, there is a strategic weekly moving average number that needs to be protected at the senior leadership team level. But it's the next questions that are really important. What skills are we missing that are leaving us short on new opportunity creation? And how do we get better? You have to create a safe environment where this difficult topic can be on the table in terms of what it will take to get better. The first item on the weekly sales agenda is risk to revenue. This is different than saying, let's look at your pipeline or your forecast. We do recommend that you consciously introduce the language of risk into the weekly agenda. The agenda then moves to the risk to growth discussion and looking at each person's moving average. Then notice the third area for the weekly sales meeting, continuous improvement. That might seem a bit soft for a sales forecast or pipeline meeting, but you want to get to the point where the weekly meeting is not about searching for clues, but instead finding new personal bests for the week ahead. It's now common practice to do deal diagnosis using a set of questions. The exercise can, however, turn into an interrogation of the salesperson, and over time, sellers simply find a way to get through the tribunal. What matters much more is getting agreement across the sales group about why these are exactly the questions needed to de-risk revenue production against the clock. These diagnostic questions are a risk isolation tool, not a gotcha. We've highlighted the part of each question that matters the most. The focus is on hard issues, obstacles, red flags, timing, and buyer power. The questions come from what we call the negative mindset and not the positive spin angle. It's useful to look at your sales team through the lens of the type of meeting and conversation you would love to be having each week. Rather than focusing on the salesperson themselves, performance is reflected in the level or type of meeting and conversations that are needed. At the upper end of the meeting continuum is the green level meeting. The conversation is about the big metrics at a high level. There's no need to dive into the salesperson's KPIs. Ownership of risk to revenue and risk to growth is a given. The conversation moves to sales innovation, ideas for creating demand, building pipeline, and increasing deal value. And then the conversation moves to how the salesperson can continue to build their own personal earnings. This is a world of peer-to-peer conversation. Both parties look forward to it. At the other end of the continuum is a red meeting. Here, the conversation moves quickly to diagnosis and KPIs. We call it a check the homework meeting. Nobody wants this meeting, neither manager nor seller, but it's needed when the salesperson is operating in the red. It's not so much a team of A players that you're looking for, it's a team of people that you know you can bring to the point where you're having only green meetings and conversations. The Metrics and Meetings Playbook is part of a bigger program called A Different Manager, currently being developed by Michael McGowan and Steve Bookbinder. It will be available digitally from Q2 2024. The program will help you to be consistently successful as a sales leader, whether you're the founder, CEO, chief commercial officer, or head of sales. We can also help you set up a sales architecture that deploys the BRMs, or big risk metrics, and help you stay on track year-round through our operating partner model.